Okay, so the Nintendo Switch 2. I've had it for about 4 days. I wanted to let you know what my thoughts were on the console. So basically, it is an iterative console. This is literally the first Nintendo console that has just more or less been an iteration on something that came before it. You think about everything else they've done. Like even something like going from Nintendo to the Super Nintendo, it was more than just a literal iteration, even though it was just a Super Nintendo, right? But they did a lot of changes to the hardware and the way they designed things and whatnot, so that it literally felt like a different experience going from that to the N64, to the GameCube, to the Wii, and so on, right? This is literally the first time Nintendo has put out a console and was like, you know what? We liked the idea of the previous console so much, we're just going to build upon it. We're just going to make it faster, bigger, better. That is essentially the idea of the Switch 2. Some people will dismiss it as, oh, it's just a Switch with a bigger screen. And that's what it would look like to the layman. But obviously, it has a lot faster performance, a lot more storage. It has more capabilities in terms of that stuff. But yes, if you want to look at it at a true baseline, it is a bigger Switch. That that's pretty accurate to say. But they have had a lot of nice little touches. Like, say, for example, let's talk about the Joy-Cons. So I've got the original Switch here with its good old classic Joy-Cons, and then we've got the Switch 2. Obviously, the Switch 2 Joy-Cons are a little bit bigger. Um, and the texture on the Joy-Cons, like these ones, this is my original Switch, so it probably feels smoother than it did originally from hand sweat and whatnot. But this has such a nicer feel. The buttons are just a little bit bigger. Everything's just a little bit bigger. You'll also notice on the side you have the rails. This one here, you had to line things up just right, like this. And you have to line it up so that you get it in there. It's a pretty simple concept, but there's always a chance that if somebody is kind of, you know, being forceful about it, they can easily damage the Joy-Con and/or the system if they're not careful. Now, it's obviously not a huge deal. It just takes a tiny bit of finesse, but it could be done, right? This basically makes it super effortless. Right here, they use a magnet instead of a rail. It just snaps right on. And then you have the button on the back. All it takes is to take it off. Now, some people will say that it's kind of silly that you can actually put it on backwards. That might be a problem. I don't know if that actually will be the problem. Who knows? There might be an actual use case for doing something like that. But it's a very well designed implement that they did over the original setup. Everything that they've done essentially on the Switch 2 has been kind of going back to the drawing board, seeing what worked, what could work better, and just iterating on it. Just kind of like what Apple does with their iPhones, which I'm filming this on an iPhone, by the way. Bigger, better, faster kind of evolution is what it boils down to. That also boils down to playing backwards compatible Switch 1 titles. Now, I did stream Tears of the Kingdom. Surprisingly, whenever I streamed, I thought it was at 1080p. The game is actually in 4K. It actually puts out a full 4K image at 60 frames a second. On the original Switch, it topped out at 900p, 30 frames a second. And that was with frame rate drops that would go into the teens or even lower potentially when you're using Ultra Hand and getting all kinds of stuff attached and whatnot. It really tanked the performance. I didn't see a single noticeable frame drop on the Switch 2 version of the game. But even games that did not receive a Switch 2 specific enhancement do still benefit from the hardware because they will have faster loading times. If they use dynamic resolutions, it will basically always be at the top resolution instead of going down. It's always going to hit the target frame rate. It seems like from practically all of my experiences with it so far, and from what I've seen with other people, it just works basically perfect out of the box for original Switch hardware, um, or Switch games rather, I suppose. But that being said, if you're in it for exclusives, yeah, there's not much right now. There's Mario Kart. That's like the only full price first party exclusive right now that's available for the console. You have a couple of download only games like Fast Fusion and Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour, which I'm not buying that because I'm not paying $10 for a tutorial game. And then there's like Yakuza Zero Director's Cut, which I'm sure that is going to eventually come out on other platforms, anyways. And it's literally just the original game with like some voice acting and a couple of like new cutscenes and crap like that. So it's not really a true exclusive in that regard. So if you're in it for like exclusive experiences, probably not a great time to get this right now. I'd probably wait at least until Donkey Kong Bonanza, which comes out next month. If that happens to be like a really damn good platformer, which it does look like it's going to be most likely, but um, then and if you're into platformers, that might be the time to pick it up then. Or if you're huge into Mario Kart, of course, if you play the hell out of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and you just have to play the next Mario Kart, obviously this is the only way to play it right now. So you might as well get one if you can, of course. Don't pay a scalper for it, though, of course, most importantly. But if you need more than that, like if you have to wait until Nintendo releases, like, say, Metroid Prime 4 and you want to use like the mouse mode, which the mouse mode works really cool, by the way. I streamed that playing Cyberpunk 2077. It worked better than I expected it would. You know, that might actually be the way I'm going to play the game after messing around with it for a while. We'll see, though. By the way, that game has a hidden mouse and keyboard mode. So even though it's not documented, you can play with a legit mouse and keyboard, just like the PC version, which you cannot do with the PS5 and Xbox Series versions of the game. So that's really cool. But I would say the best use case scenario for this is if you're really huge into the original Switch, if you're the kind of person that's still been regularly playing the original Switch up to this day, and you've been kind of suffering through it, especially playing third party games that have no business being on the original Switch, you're pretty much the primary target audience for this right now because this is going to give you such a better experience with the original Switch stuff. It's not a joke. Even games that basically ran like crap, like Batman Arkham Knight, for example, they actually work pretty good on the Switch too, practically flawlessly. Like from what I've seen, there are like a very small handful of games that apparently don't work on the Switch too, or have some major problems. Nintendo put out a list of those games apparently, but even some of those seem to work just fine for some people. So maybe it's just kind of dependent on that stuff, or maybe Nintendo's testing wasn't even that thorough. Who knows? Or maybe it was like really thorough, and other people just haven't encountered whatever problems they have yet. But that's pretty much what it boils down to. If you're huge on the original Switch, pick it up. If you're waiting more for the exclusive titles, well, keep an eye out for what those titles are. Maybe wait until those titles release to pick the system up. I am pretty satisfied with the system itself. I think the system is just a logical step forward for the console. It doesn't have any of the downsides that I had a complaint with the original Switch, and it's just a very well designed system. But I probably won't be playing it a lot because there isn't a lot for me right now. I'm more interested in the new titles, although I probably will be playing a lot of the Zelda stuff because Tears of the Kingdom running a lot better, Echoes of Wisdom running a lot better. That's going to make a much better experience for me personally. So I'll probably spend a lot of time on those. Um, Rune Factory, I've actually been enjoying that quite a bit from what I played, even though it's not an exclusive. But I'll be playing that some. Mario Kart, I am a huge Mario Kart fan, but I like multiplayer primarily. I'm not a huge fan of the single player stuff. I want people to play with me online. So let's go ahead and display the Switch friend code. And you're welcome to friend me. And we can play some Mario Kart online sometime. Although I'm not sure how much I'd actually use the game chat feature. I'd rather do Discord or something like that, to be honest. I just don't see much of a point, but who knows? Who knows? But let me know what you guys think. Are you interested in getting the Switch 2 right now, or are you kind of waiting on a specific title to come out? Let me know.